President Obama blaming the intelligence community for dropping the ball on ISIS and allowing Syria to become, in his words, ground zero for jihadists. Welcome to a brand new hour now on a Monday of America's Newsroom. Glad to have you with us today, everybody. I'm Martha McCowan.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. The president laying the blame on his director of national intelligence, James Clapper's his name, who recently admitted underestimating the strength of ISIS and overestimated the strength of the Iraqi army.
So there it lies. Ed Henry is live at the White House for us. So, Ed, the president squarely put the blame on Clapper for the failure to predict and understand the rise of this group when he is the commander-in-chief, and a lot had been happening on the ground that pointed to this.
No doubt about it. I mean, look, factually, Jim Clapper did say recently that the intelligence community should have known more, should have known sooner. But the bottom line is this also politically allows the president to perhaps duck responsibility. Because remember what he said in that sentence with 60 Minutes where he said, you know, Jim Clapper's acknowledged they underestimated the situation. What happened to the word we? I mean, Jim Clapper is the president's choice as director of national intelligence. He's part of a national security team, obviously here with the White House. And you've seen a pattern on a whole bunch of stories, whether it was healthcare.gov or whatever. Basically, the White House doesn't take responsibility, says it's the departments, it's the agencies. They messed up. But bottom line is you now have key lawmakers like Republican Peter King saying, look, intelligence officials didn't get it perfect, but they did have congressional hearings months ago where they talked about this threat. And months ago, what was the president saying? He was saying it was the JV squad.
Yeah, really interesting points. So critics are saying that withdrawing U.S. troops, obviously, from Iraq led to the rise, they believe, of ISIS. But the president says that it was not that vacuum that created this threat. Why?
Well, one of the reasons is, he said this before, but he repeated it last night in 60 Minutes, that Nouri al-Maliki, the former Iraqi prime minister, was really to blame in dividing the Iraqi people, but also refusing to sign an agreement to give the U.S. legal immunity for American troops to stay behind. A lot of that is true, but on the other hand, when you had last week on 60 Minutes, not last night, the president's own former defense secretary, Leon Panetta, say, yes, Maliki wasn't perfect, but the U.S. should have found a way to leave a residual force behind. That's damaging to the president's case, number one. And number two, as you were talking last hour, you now have the U.S. making sure that the new Afghan president signs this agreement to leave some U.S. troops behind in Afghanistan. Even if they don't want to admit it, they realize now they've got to do that in Afghanistan.
They don't want to leave that vacuum in Afghanistan as well, and that does say a lot. Ed, thanks very much.
So meanwhile, the intelligence community apparently firing back. Fox News confirming the Obama administration had options on the table to target senior leadership of a new terror group in Syria, as well as ISIS, for the past 18 months. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live on that. Catherine, what can we report on this now?
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. A military intelligence official tells Fox News that the administration did have options on the table to target senior leadership of the Khorasan group and ISIS in the 18 months leading up to the recent strikes in Syria. And while the president blamed the intelligence community for underestimating the threat in that interview with 60 Minutes, the official, who is familiar with the data collection, said the threat from ISIS and Khorasan was well documented in the president's daily brief for over a year, but the White House failed to act. The official said the intelligence community pushed hard to identify the leadership of both groups for people like the president, specifically for targeting purposes, and these options were presented to the president's team, and every one of those options, we are told, was denied until just recently.
What is the status of this leader of the Khorasan group that operates out of northern Syria? There was chatter that he was killed in the airstrikes. True or not?
Well, the information that we have currently is that both the intelligence community as well as the Department of Defense is aware of this al-Qaeda Twitter user who posted that the leader of the Khorasan group had in fact been killed. This is Muhsin al-Fadli. Al-Fadli was so close to Osama bin Laden that he's one of the few people who knew about the 2001 attacks in advance. Fox News is told the U.S. officials are waiting for additional intelligence to corroborate his death, which may include new chatter, a death photo, as well as human intelligence reporting from the region. The president's deputy national security advisor told Fox News Sunday there is real concern the terror group will put out disinformation.
We want to make sure that he's not trying to, in effect, fake his death and go underground, but there are serious indicators that he was removed. It would be significant. He's a significant leader of the ISIL effort.
Podley is not a member of ISIL, and the National Security Council confirmed to Fox yesterday that Blinken made a mistake and clearly misspoke on Fox News Sunday. Bill.
Catherine Herridge, thank you. In Washington. Martha.
So what about that new report on intelligence on ISIS and Khorasan? How much did the U.S. really know about these groups and for how long? And was there a failure by the intelligence community? And James Clapper, who is the head of tying together all of those groups, that is his job. Britt Hume is Fox News senior political analyst and joins me now. Good morning to you, Britt.
Hi, Martha.
So is this Jim Clapper's fault? And if so, should he be held accountable?
No, of course not. It's not his fault. I mean, he may have said that he underestimated the will of ISIS to fight, and he may have overestimated the will of the Iraqi forces to fight. But as far as ISIS is concerned and its advance, consider this. Back in January and February, Dianne Feinstein, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, came out of hearings that were held back at that time, warning about ISIS, its growth. ISIS had taken over Ramadi and Fallujah in Iraq by that time.
Absolutely.
So it isn't just the fact that intelligence reports warning darkly about, the potential threat of ISIS. The actual threat of ISIS was real and had been demonstrated earlier this year, much earlier this year. So the idea that this is all somehow the fault of James Clapper's underestimation of ISIS and so forth and all the rest of it, I think it falls on its face when you look at the facts. So this looks like another attempt by the administration, or our White House, I should say, especially, that is trying to lay off the blame on somebody else, as it always seems to try to do.
Yeah, and you look back at June, Fallujah, Mosul, Tikrit, all of those cities fell to this group throughout the course of the summer, and it has been going on for quite some time. There have been briefings about it. It does raise questions about how involved the president was. We know that he does not have a personal oral daily briefing. He says he reads those briefings. Do you think he wasn't pressed enough on that question by Steve Kroft yesterday, Brett?
Well, I don't know. I heard the interview, and it set off alarm bells with me. But Kroft did point out that what Clapper had said was that he underestimated the Iraqi forces, and the president then picked up on that to some extent. But I mean, look, everybody did that. I mean, that was clearly a mistake. But the idea that ISIS's threat to Iraq was not apparent because of anything James Clapper said or did not say, it seems to me, is nonsense. But this is a familiar pattern.
It is also a president who's been criticized for using the word "I" all the time. My administration, I said this. This is my, my director of national intelligence was not the way he phrased this when he put it off on him. Do you think politically that he would benefit in this environment, Britt, by saying, you know what, I should have seen this coming, and I made a mistake?
Well, the public is much more forgiving of that, I think, than it is of people who seem to be dissembling all the time and trying to shift blame. My sense about this is that the president said he made a mistake. But remember this, Martha, there is an idea that is very central to the president's foreign policy that undergirds all of this, and that is the idea that American presence in the world, especially militarily, is a big part of the problem, and that reducing it and ending it in places around the world is a big part of the solution. And obviously in Iraq, that didn't work. And for the president then to come out and say, I made a mistake, I underestimated the threat, is a way of saying he underestimated the consequences of the diminishment of the American presence in Iraq. And that's something that would undermine his whole thinking on foreign policy, which he clings to despite reversals in a multitude of places.
Yeah. One more question for you, because, when he did that whole line of questioning, when the president was saying, America is the one who always leads. We have the best military. We are the ones who are in the position to take the lead on this. What did you think of that? Because it was not the way that the president has referred to our role in the world at all in the first 5-6 years.
Well, and also you note that the administration is now very pleased about the fact that we've got, the agreement with Afghanistan,
yes,
with the Afghan government to leave a residual force there. One would hope that the scales are falling from the president's eyes, much as they fell from Jimmy Carter's eyes back in 1979 when when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the president woke up one morning and thought, "Oh my God, these Soviet Union guys, they're not what I thought they were." Well, he reversed himself and reversed policy. This president has been slow to do that, despite circumstances which would suggest that that's exactly what he ought to do. So maybe, just maybe, things are beginning to dawn on him, and he is beginning to shift his posture. You see that in the fact that he's at least willing to mount a military effort to try to halt ISIS, although he's steadfastly, as you know, refusing to put U.S. ground troops in the mix, although I think nearly everybody who's looked at this from a military standpoint thinks that they will probably be needed and that the effort ultimately cannot succeed without them.
Really interesting. But thank you so much.
You bet.